My name is Madison Blake. I'm 34 years old, and last week my mom didn't even bother to pick me up at the airport. That might seem minor, but I had just spent 10 years of my life overseas, paying off her $2 million debt. I was standing at the arrivals curb in Las Vegas, holding my suitcase and watching other families run into each other's arms. My phone buzzed. No call from my mom, no message saying she was running late, just a Facebook notification. At the top of my feed was a photo of my mom and my younger sister on a beach, drinks in their hands, matching sunglasses on, her arm wrapped around my sister like she was the only child who mattered. The caption hit harder than the jet lag. Mom's precious daughter. Something inside me went very, very quiet. 10 years of double shifts and sending money home so they wouldn't lose the house suddenly looked different in my mind, like I had been watching the wrong story the entire time. I scrolled through the comments. Heart emojis. You deserve this getaway. Cutest duo. No one in that post knew who had actually paid for that trip. I lifted my phone to my ear, called my bank's international line, and said just 6 words. Cancel every card in her name. 10 minutes later, my mom finally called. Her voice was shaking. She said they were accusing her of fraud, that her card was locked, begging me to fix it. I took a slow breath and answered calmly. This is happening because you earned it. If you've ever felt used by your own family, you'll want to hear how I finally turned the situation around. Stay with me until the end to understand exactly how it unfolded. By the time I was standing outside that airport, I had already lived through years of being the responsible one. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. Back then, my mom was different. She packed my lunches, showed up to school plays, and worked as a receptionist at a dental office. My dad was a mechanic who smelled of oil and coffee and always said the same thing when he walked through the door. As long as we stick together, we'll be fine. For a while, we were. It changed slowly, the way most difficult things do. First, my dad got sick. He went from being the strongest person I knew to someone who had to stop and catch his breath just walking from the bedroom to the kitchen. Hospital bills drained what little savings my parents had. The house that once felt stable started to feel uncertain. After he died, my mom was no longer the woman who used to dance in the kitchen on Saturday mornings. Then, Las Vegas entered our lives. When I was in high school, she announced that we were moving to the outskirts of Las Vegas. She said there were better job opportunities there and that a fresh start would help all of us. I didn't realize that being close to casinos was also part of the plan. In Vegas, the sun felt harsher and the city louder. Casinos were everywhere, like bright magnets pulling at anyone who felt even slightly desperate. My mom got a job at a dental clinic. On paper, it sounded stable. In reality, her paycheck barely reached the account before it went back out to cover bills and whatever new plan she had for getting ahead. At first, she went to the casino with coworkers just for fun. A few hours at the slot machines, a free drink, a story to tell on Monday. The first time she called me from the casino floor, her voice carried excitement I hadn't heard since my dad was alive. Maddie, I turned $20 into $800 in one night. Can you believe that? I remember feeling a strange mix of hope and concern. Maybe this was the break she kept asking the universe for. Maybe we would finally stop struggling. That was the last time it felt like luck. After that, the calls changed. She would say she had been so close to winning big and just needed a little more to recover what she lost. She started using credit cards, convincing herself she would pay them off when the big win came. Instead, balances grew, interest stacked up, late fees added more weight. I watched her chase the same illusion again and again, losing sleep, losing weight, losing perspective. By the time I graduated from nursing school, the house was one missed payment away from being taken. I took the first job I could find in an intensive care unit back in Dallas, working night shifts. I was 23 and spending more time with critically ill strangers than with my own family. Every time I called home, my mom sounded more anxious. The mortgage was behind, the credit cards were maxed out, collection agencies were calling. When she finally admitted how serious it was, that she was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, I felt my stomach drop. I did what the oldest child in a struggling family often does. I said, "I'll fix it." I picked up extra shifts, I stopped spending on myself, no new clothes, no vacations, no nights out. I sent money every month, sometimes half my paycheck, sometimes more. When that wasn't enough, I started exploring travel nurse contracts. A recruiter called about a hospital in Dubai that urgently needed experienced ICU nurses. The pay was nearly double what I was earning in Texas, plus housing. For the first time, eliminating the debt didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a calculation. If I worked there for a few years, lived modestly, and sent most of my income home, my mom could keep the house and we could finally breathe. When I told her, she cried like I had rescued her. My little sister, still a teenager then, was excited, talking about visiting me and posting pictures from the other side of the world. I remember standing at the airport for that first flight, my entire life packed into 2 suitcases, telling myself it was temporary, 2, maybe 3 years, clear the debt, stabilize everything, come home to a grateful and secure family. That was the plan. The first year in Dubai nearly broke me. The ICU was filled with emergencies. 12-hour shifts became 14. Nights blurred into days. I learned to function on caffeine, adrenaline, and the steady beeping of monitors. When my paycheck arrived, I transferred a large portion straight to my mom. Each time, she thanked me as if I had saved her again. She always promised we were close to the end, that once this bill or that loan was cleared, she would stand on her own. I wanted to believe her so badly that I ignored the details that didn't quite make sense. The quick trips she took with my sister, the new phone my sister posted online, the way the total debt never seemed to shrink as quickly as the money I sent. Whenever I asked why things were still so tight, my mom had an explanation ready. A medical bill I hadn't heard about, a home repair gone wrong, a new bank fee. She described the debt like a living thing that kept growing no matter what she did. Meanwhile, my sister's social media became more polished. New sneakers, weekends in Los Angeles for events, manicures that likely cost more than I spent on groceries in a week, poolside photos at resorts, hotel rooms with city views, party outfits, captions about working hard and enjoying life. Every time I saw those posts, I told myself a story to make it easier. Maybe she had a part-time job. Maybe brands were sending her free products. Influencers get items sponsored all the time, I thought. It was easier to believe that than to imagine my mom taking the money I worked for and pouring it back into the same hole that nearly swallowed us. On rare weeks when the hospital wasn't overwhelming, I sat at my small kitchen table in Dubai and opened a spreadsheet on my laptop. I listed every transfer I made, every promise my mom gave, every rough number she mentioned about what remained. On paper, we should have been near the finish line, but the way she spoke, it sounded like we had barely started. Whenever I asked for actual documents, she became defensive. "You don't trust me anymore after everything I've been through? I'm your mother. I would never lie to you about something like this." The guilt worked every time. I would close the spreadsheet and tell myself to focus on work. That became my identity. Not Madison, the person, not Madison, the nurse, not Madison with hobbies or relationships, just Madison, the daughter paying for everyone else. I didn't understand it then, but that was the first layer of damage. The money hurt, the exhaustion hurt, but losing the belief that I was allowed to live my own life, that would take the longest to repair. The first real crack appeared on a night that should have been ordinary. I had just finished a 12-hour ICU shift, the kind where everything blends together: alarms, emergency codes, families crying in hallways. I got home, dropped my bag, and opened my banking app out of habit. The transfer to my mom had gone through 2 days earlier. I expected the usual drop in my stomach when I saw my balance. Instead, something else caught my attention. The amount I sent was almost exactly what she said she needed to keep the mortgage current. But when I checked the joint account we used for payments, I noticed other charges. $1,000 at a resort in Los Angeles, 2 charges from a high-end restaurant on the Las Vegas Strip, multiple ATM withdrawals inside casinos. I stared at the screen, replaying our last call. She had cried about the bank pressuring her, about late fees, about losing the house if we didn't catch up that month. She never mentioned a trip. I told myself there had to be a reason, a mistake, a repayment from my sister, something. The next day, during a rare quiet moment at the nurse's station, I showed Ethan. He looked at my phone, frowned slightly, and asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you have actual statements for the debts you're paying, or just what your mom tells you? The answer made me feel foolish as soon as I said it. Mostly what she tells me. He didn't criticize me, which somehow felt worse. He simply asked if I wanted help reviewing everything. That night, we sat at my small kitchen table, my laptop between us, my stomach tight. Ethan showed me how to access my credit report and review open accounts and balances. I expected to see a few credit cards in my mom's name, with me helping indirectly. Instead, I saw accounts under my name that I didn't recognize, store cards I had never applied for, a line of credit opened 3 years ago with a Las Vegas address, a phone number that wasn't mine. I scrolled silently while my pulse pounded. "This can't be right," I said. "I don't even live there." Ethan leaned closer. "The social security number is yours, Maddie," he said quietly. "Someone used your identity to open this. You need to call the bank." My first reaction wasn't anger, it was disbelief. There had to be an error, some automatic system mix-up. I called my mom, my hands unsteady. "Hey," she answered, overly cheerful. "How is my world traveler?" I skipped the small talk. "Mom, did you open any accounts in my name?" There was a brief pause. "What are you talking about?" she replied carefully. I explained what I was seeing: the accounts, the Las Vegas address, the unfamiliar phone number. She laughed it off at first, saying credit reports are never accurate and that I was overreacting. When I didn't back down, her tone shifted. "Why are you accusing me like I'm some kind of criminal?" she snapped. "After everything I've been through? After everything I've done for you?" The guilt arrived right on time. This was our pattern. I asked a reasonable question, she turned it into a personal attack, I ended up apologizing. But this time, something inside me resisted. "I'm not accusing you," I said slowly. "I'm asking because it's my name on this debt. If something happens, they come after me." She began crying loudly, so much that I had to move the phone from my ear. "You don't understand what it's like here," she sobbed. "I'm drowning, Maddie. I've been doing my best. Those accounts are probably just how the bank restructured things. They said it was paperwork, the only way to keep us afloat." Her words rushed out, part explanation, part deflection. The word us hung between us. Us never seemed to include me when there was happiness to share. Us only appeared when she needed something. After the call, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the ceiling of my small apartment. Ethan texted down the hall, "How did it go?" I looked at the message, then typed the simplest lie. "Fine, she said the bank handled it." For a few weeks, I tried to push the whole situation into the back of my mind. I buried myself in work. I told myself the contracts had an end date, the debt had to be limited, the sacrifice would eventually pay off. Then my sister posted a video that ended any denial. It was a montage from her weekend in Los Angeles, clips of her in a hotel suite doing her makeup in a marble bathroom, spinning on a balcony behind her with city lights. At the end, she was clinking glasses with my mom at the same resort whose name I had seen on the bank statement. The caption read something like, "Girls who hustle deserve to play." I watched it 3 times. There was no hustle. There was me in the ICU holding the hands of patients who would not survive the night, me drinking stale vending machine coffee at 3 a.m., me carrying the consequences of my mom's decisions while she celebrated my sister as the precious one. That night, I called my mom again. For once, I did not soften my tone or apologize before speaking. I asked directly whether she was using the money I sent, money she said was for debt, to pay for trips, casino nights, and anything else she framed as self-care. She did not admit anything. Instead, she went on the offensive. "I can't believe you're jealous of your own sister," she snapped. "She's just trying to build a life. Not everything is about you sending money, Madison. You think you're some kind of hero because you have a job. Plenty of people have jobs." My jaw tightened. A job. That was how she described holding people's lives in my hands while she sat in front of slot machines. "Mom, I've sent you more than the average American makes in a year," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. "I have spreadsheets. I have the numbers. The debt should almost be gone by now. Why is there still so much? Why are there accounts in my name?" She went quiet briefly, then launched into a fast explanation about interest rates, banks misleading her, hidden fees, and how nothing was fair. Then she used the line she knew worked. "If you stop helping now, we lose everything. Your sister will be out on the street. Is that what you want? Do you want her homeless?" Something small but firm inside me spoke before guilt could take over. "She's 26, I said. "She can get a job." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "You're cruel," my mom whispered. "This money has changed you. Dubai has changed you. You think you're better than us now." She ended the call. I stared at the blank screen, my reflection faint in the dark glass. For the first time, instead of feeling guilty for asking questions, I felt anger. Not loud or uncontrolled anger, a steady, clear kind that made everything sharper. Over the next few months, I tried to set boundaries. I reduced the amount I sent. I said I needed to focus on my own student loans, that I couldn't continue at the same level indefinitely. Each time I lowered the amount, the crisis intensified. She would call during my shifts, leaving voicemails about collection agencies knocking on the door, about losing the only thing my dad had left us. My sister would text asking if I was upset with her, saying she felt unloved. On calls where we were all on the line, I could hear my mom prompting her in the background, feeding her phrases about loyalty, family, and sacrifice. Ethan watched me go through that cycle repeatedly. One night, after a particularly exhausting shift and an even more draining phone call, he set down his coffee and looked at me directly. "You know this isn't normal, right?" he said quietly. "Parents are supposed to support their kids, not treat them like a retirement plan." I reacted defensively. "You don't understand. She's been through a lot. She lost Dad. She's alone. If I don't help, who will?" He didn't argue. He asked one question. If you weren't there, what would she do? The answer was obvious, and it hurt. She would find a way. She would get a second job, sell the house, speak to a financial advisor, face the situation instead of transferring it to me. Realizing that didn't change everything overnight. I didn't cut her off the next day. I did what I had always done. I searched for a compromise that hurt me the least. I told myself I would send money a few more months, just until she handled the worst of it. I told myself my sister deserved time to stabilize. I told myself I could manage a little more exhaustion. I didn't realize that one last stretch of unconditional support would set up the final break. The more I tried to hold on to the version of my family I wished existed, the harder reality would hit when it showed up in writing. The breaking point didn't come with a dramatic fight. It arrived in an envelope. I came home from another long shift, kicked off my shoes, and noticed a stack of mail on the table. Most of it was junk. One envelope had my name printed in bold with a return address from a bank in the United States. I frowned. I didn't recall having any accounts with them. I opened it expecting a promotional offer. Instead, it was a notice about a past due balance on a line of credit. My line of credit. It listed a Las Vegas address I hadn't lived at in over a decade and a phone number I didn't recognize. The minimum payment was substantial, and the total balance made my stomach tighten. Before I finished reading, that same cold clarity returned. I called the number on the letter. A woman from the collections department pulled up the account and began confirming details: my full name, my social security number, the Vegas address, the phone number. I interrupted her and explained I was calling from Dubai and had never applied for this credit. There was a pause while she reviewed the file. "According to our records, this was opened in person," she said. "Application signed 3 years ago. Do you recognize the cosigner listed here?" My heart dropped as she read my mom's full name. I ended the call quietly. For a full minute, I stood in my kitchen, letter in one hand, phone in the other, feeling as if the ground had shifted. Ethan walked in with takeout shortly after. One look at my face, and he set the food down. I handed him the letter. He read it carefully, then looked at me. "Madison, this is identity theft," he said. "This isn't confusion. Someone used your information." We both knew who that was. I called my mom. She answered on the second ring, sounding distracted. "Hey, can I call you back? I'm about to head out," she said. "Out where?" I asked. There was music and chatter in the background. "It doesn't matter," she snapped. "What's going on? You sound strange." I took a breath. "Did you open a line of credit in my name 3 years ago?" The silence that followed was enough. When she spoke, her tone was sharp. "I can't believe you're throwing that at me. The bank manager said it was just paperwork. They told me we needed another account to consolidate everything. I only did it so we wouldn't lose the house. You act like I did it for fun." I imagined her at a desk signing documents with my name as if it would erase the problem. The debt didn't disappear, it shifted. "Mom, that isn't paperwork," I said, my voice unsteady. "That's my future, my credit. If I ever want to buy a house or a car, this will follow me. You didn't even ask." She began crying immediately. "I was desperate. You weren't here. You don't know how terrifying it is when collectors come to your door. I did what I had to do for this family." That phrase again, "for this family." This time I didn't let it pass. "I am part of this family," I said. "You keep saying you did it for us, but all I see are choices that damage my future so you don't have to face your own decisions." She went silent. Then her tone hardened. "If you had been here, I wouldn't have had to. You ran off to live your fancy life overseas and left me alone to deal with everything. Now you want to judge me?" I ended the call before it went further. For the next few days, I moved through the ICU on autopilot. I administered medications, calculated drips, documented vital signs. But in my head, different numbers repeated. The money I had sent, the balances that never shrank, the accounts in my name. The truth was direct and uncomfortable. My mom hadn't just relied on my help, she had used my identity like an extra credit line. One night, after a code that ended badly, I sat in the staff lounge staring at a vending machine sandwich I didn't want. Ethan sat beside me. "I think you need to go home, not to fix anything, to see it for yourself and decide what you want your life to be." The idea of going home affected me more than I expected. I hadn't returned to Las Vegas in nearly 10 years. Everything I knew about my family came through calls and social media. Distance had made it easier to accept my mom's explanations. But now there was a letter on my table and a credit report with my name on accounts I didn't open. Distance hadn't protected me. It had made it easier for her to cross boundaries without facing me. I started doing the math. I could take leave from my contract. I had enough savings to afford a trip and a few months without sending money. It would cost me, but not as much as staying in this situation indefinitely. When I called my mom and said I was thinking about coming home for a while, her reaction was immediate. "Are you serious? Oh my God, Maddie, that would be amazing. We could finally be a family again. Your sister will be so excited." She launched into a vision of dinners together, shows on the strip, introducing me to friends as if we were just another normal family with manageable issues. There was no mention of the letter, no mention of the line of credit, no acknowledgement that my savings and credit had been used to cover a problem she kept recreating. I listened, feeling both drawn in and resistant. Part of me still wanted that version of us, the airport reunion, everything simple. Another part knew that would never happen unless I stopped pretending. We chose a date. I booked the flight immediately after we hung up, watching the confirmation email arrive. 10 years of missed birthdays, holidays, and ordinary days were about to meet in a single arrival. In the weeks before the trip, my mom called more often. She sent links to houses for sale, saying we might afford one someday if we kept working hard. She talked about redecorating my old room. She talked about how we would stay up late, drinking wine and catching up. Her words tried to paint over the damage, but underneath, the problems were still there. My sister started messaging me too, sending selfies and asking what outfit she should wear to pick me up from the airport. I responded as if everything was normal, but every time I saw a new post of her at an expensive restaurant or rooftop bar, something inside me tightened. A few days before my flight, I sat down with Ethan and explained everything: the letter, the calls, the ticket home. I told him I felt like I was walking into something that looked like comfort, but might actually be a trap. He listened, then said what I needed to hear. "You're not going home to fix them," he said. "You're going home to tell the truth and decide your boundaries. If you forget that, they'll decide for you." On the day I left Dubai, I packed clothes and gifts I had bought over the years but never mailed. I also packed a folder with printed bank statements, screenshots of my credit report, and a copy of the letter. Evidence, not for them, but for me, so I couldn't be talked out of what I already knew. The flight to Las Vegas felt longer than usual. I watched movies without paying attention. I stared out the window and thought about my dad, what he would say if he saw how things had unfolded. I imagined him putting on his work jacket and repeating what he always said: "As long as we stick together, we'll be fine." But sticking together had turned into me holding everyone up while they climbed higher on my back. When the plane landed and we reached the gate, my heart was beating so hard my fingers tingled. I took my bag from the overhead bin and moved with the slow line of passengers through the terminal, down escalators toward arrivals. Hours earlier, my mom had texted, "Be at arrivals, I'll be right there." I stepped through the sliding doors into the pickup area. The dry Nevada heat hit my face even late at night. Families stood holding signs, kids ran into their parents' arms, couples greeted each other like scenes from a film. I stood there with my suitcase, scanning every car that pulled up. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. My phone remained silent. No missed calls, no message about traffic. I unlocked it. A Facebook notification appeared. I tapped it. At the top of my feed was a new post from my mom. She and my sister were sitting at a resort pool under soft lights, drinks in hand, laughing at something outside the frame. The location tag was a hotel several hours away, nowhere near the airport. The caption was simple: "Mom's precious daughter." Standing there with my suitcase and my folder of evidence, something inside me finally stopped trying to explain everything away. The story shifted, and this time I saw it clearly. When it finally made sense, it stopped hurting in the same way. I wasn't family, I was funding. I tightened my grip on the suitcase handle, looked away from my phone, and for the first time in 10 years, I made a decision purely for myself. I walked back into the terminal, found a quiet corner away from the doors, and dialed the number on the back of my debit card. When a representative answered, my voice sounded calm and steady. "I need you to cancel every card and freeze every line of credit connected to my social security number and my mother's name."
She asked me to verify my details. I provided everything. Then I explained the letter, the Las Vegas address, and the accounts I never opened. There was a pause, followed by a shift in her tone, the kind professionals use when they recognize something serious. She said, "I'm going to connect you with our fraud department. Please stay on the line." As I waited, I watched families load into cars, rolling suitcases toward lives that seemed straightforward. Mine wasn't, not yet, but for the first time, I could see a version of it that might be. The fraud specialist who answered sounded experienced. I told her everything, starting with the recent letter and tracing back through years of unexplained debt. I explained that my mother had access to my social security number and had signed documents without my consent. I told her I had been sending money for a decade, believing I was reducing old debt, not supporting new credit lines. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Based on what you're describing, this qualifies as identity theft and potential fraud. Here's what we can do today." She explained the process step by step. They could flag the accounts opened in my name, place holds on them, and begin an internal investigation. Because my mother was listed as primary on some joint accounts and co-signer on others, freezing activity tied to my information would also restrict her access. It won't erase the debt immediately, she clarified, but it will prevent further growth during the investigation and trigger a review of how the accounts were opened. I agreed to every step. The part of me that once worried about her reaction had gone quiet. The part that understood consequences was finally in control. The specialist advised me to contact the 3 major credit bureaus and place a freeze on my credit file. She emailed instructions. Sitting in a plastic chair in the arrivals hall, I followed the links and locked my credit so no new accounts could be opened without my authorization. It took minutes. Realizing how simple it was made me frustrated that I hadn't done it earlier. As soon as I ended the call, my phone began buzzing. At first, it was confirmation emails about fraud alerts and freezes.
Then, the calls started. My mom's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring once, twice. On the third call, I answered. "They're saying I committed fraud," she shouted before I could speak. "My card isn't working. I'm at checkout and it keeps declining. What did you do?" The background noise told me she was somewhere loud and public, somewhere she expected her card to work automatically. I kept my tone even. "I reported the accounts opened in my name. The bank is investigating. They froze everything connected to my social security number." She didn't ask if I had landed safely. She didn't ask where I was. She went straight to panic and blame. "How could you do this to me?" she cried. "Do you know what you've done? I can't pay for the room. I can't withdraw cash. They're talking about investigators. You need to call them back and fix this right now." In the past, that tone would have triggered the usual response: apologize, fix it, send more, sacrifice more. This time, what I felt was different. It was a quiet, exhausted clarity. "No," I said, "I'm not fixing this. You made these choices. I'm just refusing to cover for them." Her tone shifted instantly, from anger to pleading. "Maddie, please," she said. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I just needed help. I thought I could win it back. I thought if I could just get ahead once, I'd pay everything off and you'd never even notice. They'll take everything. I could lose the house. I could go to jail. You can't do this to your own mother." I closed my eyes and pictured the letter with my name on it. "You already did this to your daughter," I said quietly. "I'm choosing not to be your shield anymore." I ended the call. My hands were shaking, not from guilt, but from the realization that I meant every word. Ethan was waiting outside near the pickup area. He had insisted on flying in a day early in case I needed support. When he saw me, he didn't question my decision. He took my suitcase and nodded toward the taxi line. "Motel first, then we handle the rest." In the cab, I told him what I had done: the calls to the bank, the fraud report, my mom's reaction. He listened and gave a small nod. "You did the right thing. You handled it the way you'd want your patients treated. You told the truth and let professionals do their job." The motel we checked into was simple:
Beige walls, firm sheets, a view of a parking lot. It was neutral. It wasn't my mom's house, with its memories and emotional pressure disguised as family dinners. I spread my folder across the small table: statements, screenshots, the letter, my credit report. I photographed everything and uploaded it to a secure folder Jenna had helped set up after Ethan introduced us over video call the week before. When Jenna called that evening, I put her on speaker. She walked me through the next steps with calm clarity, much like I had done for families in the ICU. Professional, direct, focused on facts rather than feelings. Practical. We would submit an identity theft report to the Federal Trade Commission. We would send certified letters to every bank involved, formally disputing the fraudulent accounts and requesting full documentation. We would inform local law enforcement in Las Vegas so there was an official report on record. It would be a process measured in months, not days, she reminded me. But beginning it immediately was the only way to protect myself in the long run. And there was one more issue. Because my mother had used my personal information and benefited financially, any serious investigation could lead back to her. Depending on what the banks and police uncovered, she could face fraud charges or at least significant civil penalties. "Are you prepared for that?" Jenna asked. Her voice carried no judgment, only the kind of question that separates anger from a deliberate choice. I thought about my mom crying on the phone, about how she had shifted into the same script that had always worked on me before. I thought about my sister tagging their location at a luxury resort while I stood alone outside an airport. I thought about the many nights in the ICU when I had watched people die younger than my mother, people who would have given anything for more time with their children and did not use that time to turn them into financial safety nets. "Yes," I said, "I am prepared." The following days looked nothing like the reunion my mom had described. I did not go to the house. I did not sit at her kitchen table or let her hug me while she cried into my shoulder. Instead, I stayed in that motel room and made calls. I answered questions from bank investigators. I forwarded emails to Jenna. I followed every instruction from the fraud department.
From time to time, my phone lit up with calls from my mom or my sister. Sometimes I let them go to voicemail. Sometimes I listened. My mom's messages cycled through anger, guilt, and panic. She accused me of betrayal, then begged me to remember her sacrifices, then warned that I was destroying our family permanently. My sister's messages were different. She sounded confused, frightened, slightly upset, but mostly unsure. She repeated things like, "Mom says you are overreacting, that this is how families support each other. She says you are going to ruin her life." I responded more briefly than I felt. "No one ruins your life by asking for honesty," I wrote. "I never agreed to have debts opened in my name. That is not family. That is theft." She did not answer right away. I could feel the same pull on her that had kept me trapped for years. Loyalty tangled with fear. On the second night, around midnight, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I did not recognize. When I answered, a man introduced himself as part of the bank's risk and compliance team. He said they had started reviewing the account my mother opened using my information. He asked detailed questions about my location on certain dates, whether I had signed documents at that branch, whether I had granted anyone power of attorney. With every no, I could sense the picture becoming clearer on his end. "Thank you, Miss Blake," he said at the end. "We take this seriously. There will be an internal investigation. Law enforcement may contact you. Until this is resolved, your mother will not have access to accounts connected to your information." When I hung up, the room was quiet except for the steady hum of the air conditioner. I looked at the mismatched furniture, the thin curtains, the generic artwork. It should have felt bleak. Instead, it felt like the safest place I had been in years. Not because it was comfortable, but because every bill attached to that room carried my name alone. No one was hiding behind it. No one was turning it into a favor I supposedly owed. My mom wanted me to come home so I could remain her safety net. Instead, I arrived and removed it.
I did not know exactly what the consequences would look like. I only knew that for the first time, whatever happened next would not be fully controlled by her. The consequences did not arrive overnight. They never do. There was no single dramatic courtroom moment where a judge struck a gavel and my mother was taken away in handcuffs. It unfolded gradually, persistent and steady, the way hospital bills once arrived for my dad. At first, the shifts were subtle. The bank stopped calling me and began contacting her. Letters addressed to me were corrected. Accounts were marked as disputed. Investigations were documented on my file. Jenna sent updates in her steady attorney voice, explaining what the banks were doing, what the credit bureaus had adjusted, and what safeguards were now in place. Each email confirming that another fraudulent account had been removed from my credit report made me feel lighter, as if I were cutting away another weight I had dragged for years. The calls from my mom, however, grew intense. She left long voicemails about speaking with bank investigators, about answering questions she did not want to face, about how humiliating it felt. She said things like, "They are treating me like a criminal, Maddie, like I am some kind of scammer. I always helped people. I am a good person, you know that." I listened to each message once and then archived it. For the first time in my life, I allowed her discomfort to remain her responsibility. My sister's tone began to change as well. At first, she echoed my mom, insisting I was overreacting and complicating things. But as weeks passed, cards stopped working and trips stopped happening, and reality began to catch up with her too. About 2 months after I arrived in Vegas, she called instead of leaving a message. By then, I was back in Dubai, finishing the last part of my contract after a short trip to the States to sign paperwork and meet Jenna in person. I almost ignored the call, but something made me answer. "Hey," she said, and for once she sounded like the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, not the influencer who curated her life online. "I heard you were in town. You didn't come by." The guilt tried to rise, but I managed it. I had been in Las Vegas for 3 days. During that time, I sat in a small office with Jenna, signed affidavits, gave a statement to a detective who looked barely old enough to rent a car, and walked past the house I grew up in without going inside. I saw my mother's car in the driveway. I saw the curtains move, as if someone was watching. I kept walking. "I know," I said. "I was there for meetings." I could hear her breathing, searching for the right words. "Your mom says you're trying to get her arrested," she blurted out. "She says you reported her, and now the banks are pursuing fraud charges. Is that true?" I took a slow breath. "I reported accounts opened in my name without my consent," I said. "The banks decided what to do with that information." "Your mom," she corrected automatically, then paused. "Our mom." I noticed the slip and let it sit. I did not correct her. I told her what I had not told my mother. I explained the letter from the bank, the accounts I never opened, the admission that my name had been signed without permission. I described the years of transfers and the debt that never truly decreased. She fell silent in a way that told me she had known parts of this before, but had never allowed herself to connect them. "I thought she had it under control," she said finally, her voice smaller. "She always said she would pay it back. She always said you knew." I leaned my head against the wall. "That is the nature of lies," I said. "They start to sound like truth when repeated enough times." After that, updates came in pieces. A text from my sister saying the house had officially entered foreclosure, an email from Jenna explaining that my mother had accepted a plea agreement for the fraud charges the bank pursued. No prison time, but probation, mandatory counseling for gambling addiction, and restitution payments that would follow her for years. A final voicemail from my mom, shifting between blaming me, blaming the bank, and briefly blaming herself. I never heard her say, "I stole from you." What she said instead was, "I just borrowed. I thought I would fix it." In some ways, that sounded worse. While everything unfolded in Nevada, my own life was quietly reorganizing. I completed my final contract in Dubai and declined the renewal. The pay was strong, but I was finished building my life around other people's emergencies, both at work and at home. I applied for ICU positions back in the United States, carefully choosing cities where no family member lived within driving distance. I accepted a job at a hospital in Denver, a place with mountains instead of neon, where the only lights at night came from homes and street lamps, not casinos drawing people inside. The day I signed the lease on a small apartment there, entirely in my name, supported by my income and my repaired credit report, I sat in my car and cried. Not from panic or grief, but from release. I was 34 years old, and it felt like I was finally stepping into my first real home. Ethan moved a few months later, taking a position with a bank in the same city. He did not dramatize it. He simply said he was ready for a different pace and that the mountains suited his running better. We did not create an instant fairy tale life. We both worked long shifts, we both carried scars, but we built routines that were ours shaped around stability rather than managing someone else's crisis. Brunch on Sundays after night shifts, walks through the neighborhood when our minds were crowded with other people's emergencies.
Therapy appointments we did not cancel just because we were busy. In therapy, I began untangling the mix of loyalty, duty, and love that had kept me tied to my mom for so long. I talked about being the child who translated bills and doctor's notes for her, about carrying adult stress in a kid's body. I described how she could be warm, funny, and generous, and then become sharp and cruel the moment someone questioned her choices. My therapist used words I had avoided for years: parentification, financial abuse, emotional manipulation. Those labels did not change the past, but they explained why it had felt the way it did. Naming it made it easier to set down. My mom tried calling a few more times during those early months. Eventually, instead of letting it go to voicemail, I answered. I was sitting on the floor of my half-unpacked living room, surrounded by boxes and the smell of fresh paint. She did not say hello. She said, "They took the house. Are you happy now?" My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "No," I said. "Losing the house does not make me happy. It makes me sad that it came to this, but I am not the one who gambled it away." She moved into the familiar script, blaming the casino, the bank, the economy, a run of bad luck. I let her speak until she ran out of words. When she finally stopped, I said what I had practiced in my head for weeks. "I am not sending you any more money, Mom. I am not co-signing anything. I am not letting you use my credit or my name again. I hope you take counseling seriously. I hope you get better, but I am done rescuing you." There was a long pause. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. "So that's it?" she said. "After everything I've done for you?" I thought about the lunches she packed when I was young, the way she cheered at school plays, the way she held me when my dad died. Then I thought about the forged signatures in my name, the sleepless nights, the way she left me at the airport so she could drink by a pool. Both versions of her were real. The mistake I made for years was believing the loving parts erased the damage. They did not. They only made it harder to see clearly. "I am grateful for the good things," I said. "I truly am, but they do not cancel out the harm. I cannot keep pretending they do." She did not answer that. She cried quietly for a moment, then hung up. That was the last real conversation we had. We still exist in each other's lives in small, distant ways. Holiday texts that feel more like routine than connection. Updates passed through my sister, who has slowly built a more stable life, doing makeup for weddings and working double shifts at a restaurant when needed. One night on a video call, she apologized in a shaky voice. She said she had known something was wrong, but had been too scared to question the person paying for everything. I told her I understood, because I did. For a long time, that person had been me. The truth about stepping out of a role you were never meant to play is this: the world does not collapse when you put it down. Bills still arrive, consequences still land. People complain, withdraw, and accuse you of not caring. Then, slowly, they adjust, or they don't.
Either way, you stop living in a constant cycle of panic and guilt. About a year after that night at the airport, I was sitting at my kitchen table in Denver with my laptop open. My bank balance was on the screen, steady and unremarkable in the best possible way. My paycheck had come in, and for the first time in years, there was no automatic transfer scheduled to leave immediately. The money simply stayed where it was. I felt the old instinct pull at me, the urge to send some of it back home, just in case. Instead, I moved a portion into savings and another into a small travel fund with only my name on it. When I closed the laptop, Ethan came in from a run, flushed and breathing hard. "How does it feel?" he asked, nodding at the computer. I thought about the airport, the call to the bank, the motel room and the folder of evidence, the courtroom where I sat quietly in the back while my mother accepted a plea deal. I thought about the calm nights in my own apartment, the patients I could not save, the ones I could, and the fact that my exhaustion now came from work I chose, not from debt I did not create. "It feels like mine," I said. "For the first time, it feels like my life actually belongs to me." That was the real ending, more than any legal document or foreclosure notice. Not my mother losing her house or being ordered into counseling, not my sister working late shifts to cover her own expenses. The most satisfying part was standing in my own kitchen in a city my mother had never visited, knowing that every bill with my name on it is one I chose and could manage on my terms. The revenge was not only in what she lost, it was in what I finally reclaimed.
But over time, I realized the real victory was not what happened to her, it was what finally happened for me. In therapy, I spent many sessions asking why it took me so long to see what was obvious. The signs were there: secrecy, never seeing actual statements, debt that never decreased despite the large amounts I sent, my name appearing on accounts I never opened. If a patient's family member had described this to me, I would have identified it immediately: financial abuse, identity theft, emotional manipulation. But when it is your own mother, those words feel too harsh at first. You hesitate to apply terms like abuse to someone who packed your lunches and held your hand at your father's funeral. So you create softer explanations. She is overwhelmed. She is confused. She does not understand how banks work. She is just unlucky. You call that loyalty. In reality, it is self-protection, because once you admit that someone you love is treating you like a resource instead of a person, you cannot ignore it anymore. If you are listening and this feels uncomfortably familiar, hear this clearly. When someone in your family constantly asks for money, lies about why they need it, hides the real numbers, or makes you feel guilty for asking questions, that is not normal. When you feel anxious opening your banking app, when you hesitate to mention your own bills because you know they will say theirs matter more, that is not normal. When someone uses your social security number or identity without clear permission and calls it paperwork, that is not love. That is theft. I don't care if they are a parent, sibling, partner, or grandparent. A title does not erase behavior. Financial abuse does not always look like someone taking your wallet. Sometimes it looks like a parent using your future as collateral for their bad decisions. Sometimes it sounds like, "If you don't help, we will be homeless." Sometimes it sounds like, "After everything I've done for you, you owe me." It almost always arrives wrapped in guilt. That is how it works. You are taught to feel selfish for wanting a life that does not revolve around saving them. One of the hardest lessons I learned was that setting financial boundaries with my mother did not make me a bad daughter. It made me a responsible adult. For years, I believed being a good daughter meant preventing her from ever hitting rock bottom. In reality, my constant rescuing kept her from facing the consequences of her actions. She did not need counseling because she could call me. She did not need to cut up her cards because I would transfer more money. She did not have to tell my sister no because I filled the gap.
When I stepped back, everything I had been holding up collapsed. It was messy, it hurt people, including me, but it also ended the pretending. My mother had to sit with a counselor and talk about her gambling instead of calling it bad luck. She had to stand in court and hear the word fraud connected to her name instead of blaming the bank. My sister had to learn what most adults learn earlier, that nice things cost money, and money must come from somewhere real. Did that solve everything? No, my mom is still who she is. Maybe she'll change, maybe she won't. My sister and I are closer now, but there's still a scar where years of silence and half-truths once lived. This is not a fairy tale. It's simply better than the situation I was in before. The part I control now is myself. I monitor my credit, I freeze it when needed, I check it regularly. I do not share my social security number casually. I do not co-sign loans. I read every line of any document with my name on it. If someone rolls their eyes and calls me paranoid, I talk openly about what happened instead of hiding it as a secret, because secrecy is where situations like this grow. If you are in the United States and you recognize yourself more in my mother than in me, if the word gambling makes your stomach tighten because you know you are one bad night away from asking someone to bail you out again, there are professionals who help with that. There are hotlines, counselors, and support groups for problem gambling. You do not have to wait until your child freezes your accounts and you are standing at a checkout with a declined card and a fraud investigator calling. Ask for help before you pull someone else down with you. And if you see yourself in me, the child, partner, or sibling who has become the unpaid accountant and emergency fund for everyone else, this is what I wish someone had told me years ago. You are allowed to ask for proof. You are allowed to see the statements. You are allowed to say, I will help this once, but I need a plan so it doesn't happen again. You are allowed to say no. Even if they call you selfish, you are allowed to protect your credit, your savings, your future. That does not make you cold. It makes you careful. It may feel cruel in the moment because you were taught to equate love with sacrifice, but love without boundaries is not love. It's erasure. You disappear so others can stay comfortable. That is not why you are here. One of the most important steps I took was speaking with a therapist. I understand therapy is not accessible for everyone, but if you can talk to a professional or even a trusted friend who will say, that is not okay and you deserve better, do it. When you say the numbers, the lies, and the late-night calls out loud, it becomes harder to minimize. It becomes real in a way your mind can't push aside. If you are afraid of what will happen if you stop paying, I understand. I was terrified. I imagined my mom homeless, my sister blaming me forever, extended family cutting me off. None of that happened. What happened were foreclosure notices, court dates, counseling sessions, and many angry calls. What also happened was that I finally had the energy and money to build a life that did not revolve around someone else's addiction. I moved, I saved, I slept, I laughed without checking my phone every few minutes to see if there was a crisis. I rediscovered hobbies. I learned I preferred hiking over casinos, and quiet mornings with coffee and silence can feel like luxury when you're used to constant emergencies. People often say blood is thicker than water, using it to excuse almost anything. Here is what I know now. Family is not defined by shared DNA. Family is made up of people who do not turn you into collateral, people who respect your boundaries and see you as a person, not a paycheck. In the end, my mom faced consequences. She lost her house, she attended counseling, she now carries a record that will follow her for years. Part of me is still sad about that. She is my mother. I wish she had chosen differently. I wish she had asked for help before stealing from me, before leaving me at the airport to sit alone. But the part of me that stayed in that motel room and made those calls does not regret it. That version of me is the reason I'm not still trapped in the same cycle. If your family has taken you for granted, I am not telling you to burn every bridge. I'm telling you that you are allowed to step off the bridge they keep building on your back. You are allowed to say, I will not fund this anymore. You are allowed to choose calm over constant panic. You are allowed to build a life where your hard work supports your goals, not someone else's addiction. That is my revenge story, not an explosion, but a steady reclaiming of everything I gave away without realizing it. Money, time, sleep, self-respect. If you recognize yourself in any part of this, take one small step to protect yourself. Pull your credit report, ask a difficult question, talk to someone, set one boundary and keep it. It may feel like the end of the world at first. It's not. It might be the beginning of getting your life back. And despite everything, I can say honestly, that feeling is worth it.